Did aliens land at Holloman Air Force Base in 1971? Well, according to President George Bush Sr., they did. Get in here, this is Jack with Cosmic Road. I talk about UFOs and the paranormal. Please hit like, please subscribe, share on social media, and let me know what you think in the comments below. Okay, so there are multiple versions of the story about President Eisenhower meeting with the beings in the 50s, shortly following the landing or the flyover of UFOs of Washington, D.C. in 1952. Are the two related? It's hard to say. In one of those versions, he met with the beings at Holloman Air Force Base, I believe in 1954. However, that is not the only time that beings have sat down at Holloman Air Force Base, according to various stories out there. In particular, there is a very famous incident that happened in 1971, where there are multiple witnesses and apparently even video of a craft setting down and beings emerging and actually dealing with high officers of the military. It's a crazy story. I would love to know what they talked about and what any treaties they made or deals they made or what exactly the specifics of that were. I don't have those specifics, but apparently this meeting did happen. This is coming from Jacques Vallée's newest book. It's just a compilation of his journal entries over a period of time, and he's released several of them. And lots of people are talking about this latest book. It's just really incredible. I have not had a chance to read it, but I have seen a lot of the information that is in it. And so far, just mind-blowing, and there's just one great golden nugget after another. And, of course, he's friends with Eric Davis, and Eric Davis was told this directly from President George H.W. Bush, George Sr. And, on a recent episode of Richard Dolan, he talks about this, and that's what really alerted me to this story, although I've seen other people talk about this as well. Let's listen to what Richard had to say when President Bush was asked by Eric if the aliens actually landed at Holloman Air Force Base in 1971. Here goes.
But it gets even better. So Davis asks Bush, okay, you're aware of it. Let's get real here. Was that a training film? Was that a special ops exercise? In other words, was there a conventional explanation to that whole event? And what Bush says is no. It was the real thing. There was a secret project, said Bush, and the security was obscene. That was his word. The security was obscene. So he's talking about it in the past tense. So you might think, well, maybe there isn't a present version of that, but I think that's kind of ridiculous. Of course, there's a present version of it. Bush is talking about ancient history here, 1971 Holloman, and he's also referring to what he knew in his active years with CIA and as president. So yeah, he's going to talk about the security was obscene. The program was real. This was the real thing. An extraordinary statement by George Herbert Walker Bush on what I will say is the UFO and ET reality. And here it is in Vallée's book. Really, for the first time, I think you get something approaching, a specific statement that I think can reliably be attributed to the former president. His people around him would probably say, that's all rumor, that's all, just people talking. But look, we're getting this directly from from Davis to Vallée. And so you can say, well, Davis is just making this up. But, I don't think that's the case. I don't think there's any reason that any rational person.
Me either. I don't think that's the case at all. Dolan says Vallée writes that Davis also asked Bush if the materials Colonel Corso was working on could have been Nazi hardware. Bush replied, impossible. All German secrets were preserved and filed away. Okay, so what is the UFO landing at Holloman Air Force Base in 1971? The story began in 1973 when Robert Emmenegger and Alan Sandler, well-known Los Angeles businessmen and producers, were invited to Norton Air Force Base in California to discuss the production of a documentary based on prospective research projects. The invitees, along with Commander-in-Chief of the Special Investigations Division and the head of the Intelligence Department, Paul Shardy, discussed many projects. One of them concerned a UFO. The material was the most interesting. It was immediately approved for development and was planned to shoot a film based on it. They were informed that there were some documentaries filmed at Holloman Air Force Base, New Mexico in 1971. In '88, on one of the state TV channels, Shardy gave an interview in which he told that he had seen the aforementioned film shot on 16mm film. It showed how 3 flying objects in the shape of a disc arrived, one of which landed, and the other 2 flew away. On the landed UFO, a door opened from which 3 creatures appeared. They were as tall as a man. His complexion was strange, probably gray, and his nose was clearly defined. The aliens were clad in tight coveralls, wearing headdresses that may also have served a communication function. The aliens had translator devices in their hands. The aliens were met by the commander of the Holloman base and other Air Force officers. Emenegger was convinced that he would get the recording data to use when working on the documentary. Robert was even taken to Norton and shown the landing pad and hangar where the spacecraft was parked in 1971. He was then escorted to the buildings. So this thing was actually in a hangar. Interesting. The buildings were, according to the military, according to the military, negotiations between the officers and the aliens took place over the next few days. So the president wasn't involved in this. Interesting. According to witnesses, the UFO landing took place at 6 o'clock in the morning. The aliens were professional doctors. Interesting. The pupils of their eyes were vertical like those of cats. Their mouths were like slits, and there were no chins at all. Emenegger was told that this was the only recorded case in the practice of the Air Force when the highest officer ranks directly communicated with aliens. Emenegger and Sandler planned to expand the plot of their upcoming film as something hypothetical that might happen in the future. The military said that they would give this film with the image of the landing to Robert. However, a little later, this agreement was canceled. Emenegger was disappointed and went to his friend at Patterson Air Force Base to see Colonel George Weinbrenner in order to find out why the project to produce a documentary about UFOs was frozen. According to Robert, their meeting took place in Weinbrenner's office. The colonel suddenly began to behave inappropriately. He went to the blackboard and deliberately began to complain in a loud voice. Damn MiG-25s, the Soviets have a lot of secrets that we have no idea about. We need to find out as much as possible about the MiGs. Moving to the bookshelf and continuing the monologue about the jet fighter, he took the book and handed it to Emenegger. It was Allen Hynek's UFO Experience, 1972, with a signature from the author to Weinbrenner. It was like a scene from a Kafka play. Based on the colonel's strange behavior, Robert concluded that the film telling about the UFO landing is real. Due to the fact that their conversation was tapped, Weinbrenner could not report it openly. The documentary film, UFO Past, Present, and Future, was released in '74, however, without the participation of the described secret footage. In addition, a paperback book was also published. So there you have it. There's the story of the beings landing in 1971 at Holloman Air Force Base. I wish we had more information about what they talked about. Of course, there are various versions of the story of President Eisenhower meeting with beings at Holloman Air Force Base and one other Air Force base. But, I don't know which of those versions is correct. And in any case, this is not that meeting. This happened years later. So, what's the deal? Well, and there's another famous incident in the 60s where beings apparently landed at Holloman Air Force Base. So they seem to like Holloman Air Force Base or have some high-level connection or communication going with people at Holloman Air Force Base. Who knows, but George Bush Sr., director of the CIA and involved in all sorts of stuff, before he became president, a very powerful, knowledgeable person with vast resources and information, said this event happened. So he didn't go into any details. I would love for him to have expounded on that to Eric, but such was not to be, or at least Eric didn't provide any of those details to Jacques. But it's an incredibly juicy story, so we have very reliable information now that the beings were interacting with military officials in 1971. Now, my information goes back further than that, and this would only be one of many interactions, according to what I understand, that the beings engaged in. But I'll save that for another video. I've talked about that before. You can check those videos out. But let me know what you think about this incredible meeting and this information. So, yeah, let me know in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. Smash that subscribe button and the bell to be notified of future videos. You don't want to miss a thing. Join me on social media. There's Facebook and Twitter links below. I'd love to see you guys there. And yeah, check out some of my other videos. Until next time, this is Jack with Cosmic Road signing out.